Namaste, everyone. Today we visit a chapter of history that is not just about war, but about a young nation's resolve, its people's courage, and the birth of a legacy. The Indo-Pak War of 1947 to 48 was independent India's first trial by fire. Just months after gaining freedom, India was thrust into a brutal conflict to defend the crown of its unity, Jammu and Kashmir. This was a war of betrayal and bloodshed, but also of heroism and harmony. From the snow-capped passes of Zoji to the burning fields of Poonch, our soldiers, men of all faiths and religions, stood together for a cause greater than themselves. This presentation is a tribute to all those who fought, to those who fell, and to those who rose to make sure India stood tall. Let us journey through this epic together. Introduction: India's first war as a free nation. Just 2 months after gaining independence, India was thrust into its first war, a conflict that would define its national identity and test its resolve. The War of 1947-48 was fought to defend Jammu and Kashmir from an invasion orchestrated by Pakistan using tribal raiders and military officers. This war was not just about territory, it was about protecting innocent lives, upholding secular values, and preserving the unity of a newly born nation. Indian soldiers, many barely out of training, were called upon to fight in hostile terrains from the snow covered peaks of Ladakh to the burning plains of Poonch. What emerged was a story of sacrifice, courage, and national solidarity etched forever in country's collective memory. This was a war where heroes were born, where the tricolor was held high even as bullets rained down, and where India proved that its spirit was stronger than fear. Partition and the Kashmir Dilemma. In 1947, as British India was divided into India and Pakistan, princely states were given the choice to accede to either nation or remain independent. Jammu and Kashmir, a Muslim majority region ruled by Hindu Maharaja Hari Singh, chose to remain neutral, signing a standstill agreement with Pakistan. However, Pakistan's ambitions didn't allow patience. Leaders in Karachi viewed Kashmir as a natural part of their country and began issuing veiled threats. Kashmir's geography and its Muslim population made it strategic for both nations. It delayed decision on accession led to growing tensions. Meanwhile, internal unrest in the region, especially in Poonch, grew more violent, giving Pakistan a pretext to act. India meanwhile respected the Maharaja's right to decide, refraining from military involvement unless invited, but danger was already brewing on the borders. Kashmir's dream of independence was on borrowed time. The storm was about to begin. Brewing storm in Poonch and Pakistan's intentions. Travel began in the Poonch region of Jammu in August 1947, where a Muslim majority population, mostly ex-servicemen, rose in rebellion against the Maharaja's rule. What started as a local agrarian protest was soon transformed into a secessionist movement aided and abetted by Pakistan. Pakistani officials warned the Maharaja that failure to accede to Pakistan would lead to grave trouble, a thinly veiled threat. Across the border, Pakistan began mobilizing support for an invasion, preparing tribal militias and aligning military plans to forcibly take Kashmir. The Maharaja's state forces, already stretched thin by communal unrest, struggled to contain the growing rebellion in Poonch. By October, Pakistan had shifted from pressure to preparation, arming rebels and preparing a cross border invasion under the guise of tribal uprising. Kashmir, surrounded by chaos, stood on the edge of collapse, while the world remained unaware of the danger gathering in its shadows. Operation Gulmarg, Pakistan's covert invasion. Even before the first shot was fired, Pakistan had secretly prepared a military blueprint called Operation Gulmarg to capture Kashmir by force. The plan involved thousands of Pashtun tribal warriors from the northwest frontier who would launch a surprise invasion. Each district of tribal region was to send a luxury of 1,000 fighters, armed and guided by retired Pakistani officers in civil clothing. These raiders would be supported with weapons, vehicles, and a road map to seize key towns like Muzaffarabad, Baramulla, and ultimately Srinagar. While Pakistan's army couldn't officially enter the conflict without risking international backlash, it used tribal militias as proxy forces. Meanwhile, Pakistani intelligence and military logistics provided covert support, turning this into a carefully orchestrated campaign. The goal was to take Kashmir quickly before India could react and then present a fait accompli to the world. Tribal invasion begins October 22, 1947. On the morning of 22nd October 1947, the silence broke. Thousands of tribal raiders crossed into Kashmir from Pakistan, launching a full-scale invasion. The first town to fall was Muzaffarabad, where the local garrison was overrun and the residents were slaughtered. The Jammu and Kashmir state forces, ill equipped and isolated, collapsed under the weight of a sudden assault. The invaders advanced rapidly through Uri and toward Baramulla, burning villages and murdering civilians in their path. Witness accounts spoke of massacres, loot, rape, and abductions, with Hindus, Sikhs, and even Muslims falling victim. The razing of Baramulla was especially horrific. Hospitals, churches, and temples were desecrated, nuns and nurses attacked, and entire neighborhoods torched. As Baramulla burned, Srinagar was just 50 kilometers away. The invaders were on the doorstep of Kashmir's capital, and the time was running out. Baramulla massacre, a town under siege. On 26th October 1947, the tribal raiders entered Baramulla, a peaceful town just 50 kilometers from Srinagar, and unleashed terror. 4 days, the town witnessed an orgy of looting, rape, murder, and arson that shocked even seasoned observers. The St. Joseph's Mission Hospital was attacked. Nurses and patients were killed, and heroic nuns like Sister Teresa Lina died protecting others. Colonel and Mrs. Dykes, a European couple were shot trying to defend the hospital's residents. Gurudwaras and temples were desecrated. Hindu and Sikh homes were ransacked. Women were kidnapped or brutally assaulted. Even Muslim civilians were not spared if they resisted or tried to protect others. Baramulla became a ghost town drenched in blood. This delay in plundering Baramulla, though strategic, would unintentionally give India just enough time to act. Atrocities committed by the raiders. The tribal raiders, guided by Pakistani officers, committed widespread atrocities across the captured regions of Kashmir. In Baramulla, over 11,000 civilians are estimated to have been killed in a single day. Many more were abducted or mutilated. Reports detailed mass rapes, including of young girls and elderly women, and forced conversions of captives. Religious sites were pillaged, temples were burned, and gurudwaras vandalized. Hospitals and schools became killing fields. The Mohra power station was destroyed, plunging the Kashmir Valley into darkness for days. Kashmir's leader, Sheikh Abdullah, later declared at the UN thousands were massacred, girls abducted, property looted. The violence was not just limited to Hindus or Sikhs. Many Muslims were also killed if they resisted or were seen as loyal to India. Delay that saved Kashmir. The 4 day looting of Baramulla unintentionally became a turning point. It stalled the raiders' advance on to Srinagar. Their lust for plunder caused critical delays. They paused to divide loot, abduct women, and enjoy the spoils. These days of carnage caused them momentum. By the time they began moving again, Indian government had swung into action. Maharaja Hari Singh, realizing the capital was in mortal danger, fled to Jammu and urgently appealed to India for help. His message reached Delhi just in time. Indian leaders insisted that aid could be given only if Kashmir legally acceded to India. The delay in Baramulla, while tragic, bought those essential 72 hours that changed the fate of Kashmir forever. Without that pause, Srinagar would likely have fallen and history would have taken a different course. The Maharaja's accession to India. On 26th October 1947, Maharaja Hari Singh signed the Instrument of Accession, legally joining Jammu and Kashmir to India. The agreement gave India control over defense, communications, and foreign affairs, making Kashmir a part of Indian Union. This historic decision came at the grave crisis as enemies stood at the gates of Srinagar. Governor General Lord Mountbatten formally accepted the accession on 27th October and in the Indian cabinet acted immediately. The accession was not just legal, it was moral call to protect the innocent and preserve secularism in a diverse state. Sheikh Abdullah, the most popular Kashmiri leader, backed the decision, calling the tribal invasion a crime against humanity. With this act, India now had full right and responsibility to send its army into Kashmir to defend its newest state. India reacts. The historic airlift to Srinagar. On 27th October 1947, India launched one of the most daring military operations in its history, a full-scale airlift to Srinagar. At dawn, Dakota aircrafts of the Indian Air Force began flying troops of the 1st Sikh Regiment from Delhi to Srinagar. The situation was so urgent that soldiers boarded with minimal equipment, unsure if the runway would be under attack. The first planes landed safely by 9:30 a.m., and troops immediately took defensive positions to secure the airport. Lieutenant Colonel Diwan Ranjit Rai, leading the vanguard, was ordered to hold Srinagar at all costs until reinforcements arrived. Throughout the day, wave after wave of Indian soldiers landed, marking the beginning of India's military pushback. This airlift, launched within hours of accession, saved Srinagar from falling and began India's fight back in Kashmir. Defense of Srinagar. Lieutenant Colonel Ranjit Rai's stand. As the first Indian troops landed in Srinagar, Lieutenant Colonel Diwan Ranjit Rai took swift command to defend the capital from imminent attack. Understanding the urgency, he led his men forward from the airstrip towards Baramulla, determined to intercept the advancing raiders. On 28 October, Rai's forces clashed with the tribal invaders near Pattan, delaying their momentum and causing significant casualties. Despite being heavily outnumbered, he took bold tactical decisions using hit and run tactics to confuse the enemy. In one of these rearguard actions, Lieutenant Colonel Ranjit Rai was killed in combat, becoming independent India's first army martyr. His gallant stand delayed the enemy just long enough for Indian reinforcements to pour into the valley. Rai's sacrifice ensured Srinagar remained in Indian hands, setting the tone for Army's courage in the battles ahead. Major Somnath Sharma and the Battle of Badgam. On 3rd November 1947, Major Somnath Sharma, despite a fractured left arm, led a company of 4th Kumaon to Badgam, near Srinagar. His force, around 120 men, faced 700 tribal fighters, advancing to break India's defenses and capture the airport. The enemy surrounded them on three sides. Under relentless fire, Sharma ran between positions, distributing ammunition and encouraging his men. Refusing to retreat, he reported, "We are heavily outnumbered. I shall not withdraw an inch, but fight to the last man." A mortar shell struck their position, and Sharma was killed in action, along with most of his troops. However, his fierce resistance stopped the enemy's advance, allowing reinforcement to secure Srinagar. For this supreme sacrifice and unmatched bravery, Major Somnath Sharma was posthumously awarded India's first Param Veer Chakra. Indian victory at Shalateng and recapture of Baramulla. Following Badgam, the Indian Army moved swiftly to reclaim the initiative, launching a counter-attack on 7th November 1947 at Shalateng. Brigadier L.P. Sen led a coordinated assault involving infantry, light tanks, and Air Force dive bombers. The tribal invaders, caught off guard by India's aggression and firepower, suffered over 300 casualties in a single day. The fierce battle shattered the morale of the raiders, who began retreating in panic toward Baramulla and Uri. Indian troops pursued relentlessly. By 8th November, Baramulla was recaptured and Uri fell shortly after. Srinagar was now secure, and the enemy was pushed back from the heart of the valley. This victory was a turning point, proving that India was no longer on the defensive, it was now fighting back and winning. Siege of Poonch, a town surrounded. While the valley was secured, the town of Poonch in Jammu faced a dire siege surrounded by tribal raiders and rebels. Swollen with 40,000 Hindu and Sikh refugees, Poonch was isolated and under constant enemy attack from November 1947 onward. The terrain prevented easy access, supply lines were cut, and the town faced artillery bombardment, sniper fire, and starvation. The civilian population, including women and children, huddled in makeshift shelters as enemy tightened the noose. Local forces and ex-servicemen formed militias to hold the town, but they lacked food, ammunition, and medical supplies. The siege lasted over one full year, becoming one of the longest and most dramatic standoffs in Indian military history. Poon's survival depended on daring leadership, relentless defense, and an air bridge that would soon change the war's course. Brigadier Pritam Singh's leadership in Poonch. In November 1947, Lieutenant Colonel Pritam Singh, leading 1st Kumaon, marched over hills and rivers to enter besieged Poonch. Upon arrival, he was promoted to brigadier and took charge of organizing a disciplined multi-layered defense. Despite being heavily outnumbered, he transformed refugees, local volunteers, and soldiers into a unified, determined garrison. Brigadier Pritam Singh oversaw the creation of a makeshift airstrip in early December, risking everything to connect with India. On 12th December, Wing Commander Meher Singh landed the 1st Dakota in Poonch under enemy fire, beginning the historic airlift. The Indian Air Force flew in supplies and evacuated thousands of civilians. Over 40,000 lives were saved. Pritam Singh's leadership earned him the title Sher of Poonch. His courage ensured that Poonch never failed. The Great Poonch Airlift, India's aviation triumph. With Poonch surrounded, India launched one of the most daring wartime airlifts in its history to sustain the besieged town. Brigadier Pritam Singh's men built a makeshift airstrip, and on 12 December 1947, Wing Commander Meher Singh landed the 1st Dakota under fire. The Indian Air Force began a non-stop airlift, flying in food, arms, ammunition, and medicine despite harsh terrain and enemy shelling. Aircraft would land on a narrow road-turned runway, deliver supplies, and evacuate refugees on return trip. Over time, more than 40,000 civilians were safely airlifted out of Poonch, making it one of the largest humanitarian missions after World War II. This sustained operation ensured the garrison held firm and gave hope to the trapped civilians. The Poonch airlifts stand as a symbol of Indian resilience, courage, and aerial innovation under extreme adversity. Nowshera, Brigadier Usman. In the Nowshera sector of Jammu, Brigadier Muhammad Usman led India's defense against repeated Pakistani-led attacks. A deeply patriotic Indian Muslim officer, Usman refused to migrate to Pakistan and become a symbol of secular nationalism. After Jhangar fell in December 1947, the enemy turned its sights to Naushera, planning a massive assault. On 6th February 1948, over 2,000 tribal raiders attacked Naushera from three directions under cover of fog. Brigadier Usman's strategic planning and bold leadership repelled the attack, inflicting heavy losses on the enemy. His forces held firm, and Naushera remained under Indian control. His victory lifted national morale. Brigadier Usman was later martyred in July 1948 during a shelling attack, becoming the highest ranking Indian officer to die in the war and a national hero. Naik Jadunath Singh's valor at Taindar. On 6th February 1948, the Battle of Naushera, Naik Jadunath Singh and 9 men held a forward post at Taindar against overwhelming odds. The post was attacked repeatedly by waves of 200 to 300 enemy soldiers backed by mortars and machine guns. Jadunath's comrades fell one by one, but he continued to fight on, alone and wounded. He took over the light machine gun. He repelled three assaults, and when his ammunition ran low, he charged the enemy with a rifle and bayonet, killing several attackers. His fearless resistance delayed the advance long enough for Indian reinforcements to arrive. Naik Jadunath Singh was killed in action, but his stand saved Naushera from being overrun. For his unmatched bravery, he was posthumously awarded the Paramveer Chakra, India's highest wartime gallantry award. Operation Vijay, recapture of Jhangar. After the loss of Jhangar, Indian forces launched Operation Vijay in March 1948 to retake the strategic town. Jhangar connected Naushera and Poonch. Its recovery was vital to securing the Western Front. Indian troops under Brigadier Usman and Major General K.S. Thimaiya attacked from two sides, crossing hills and frozen streams. After intense fighting and navigating minefields, they stormed the enemy defenses on 18th March 1948. The final assault broke through the outer ridge lines, and the enemy retreated in disarray, leaving behind weapons and dead. Jhangar was liberated. The army tricolor was raised again, a huge moral booster for the Indian Army. This victory saved the way for further offensives and stabilized the region around Poonch and Naushera. Liberation of Rajouri and Brigadier Usman's martyrdom. After securing Naushera and Jhangar, Indian troops turned towards Rajouri, which had fallen into enemy hands earlier in the war. In April 1948, Indian forces launched an uphill assault, marching through treacherous terrain to surprise the enemy. When the Indian Army entered Rajouri, they found signs of mass killings and destruction. Entire villages wiped out. Thousands of civilians had been massacred or displaced under enemy occupation. It was a tragic reminder of what was at stake. The recapture of Rajouri re-established Indian control over key areas in Jammu and blocked enemy supply lines. During this campaign, Brigadier Usman was killed by enemy shell fire. His leadership until that point had been instrumental in the war. India mourned his loss deeply. He was buried with full military honors, and his legacy as the Lion of Nowshera endures in Indian history. The war reaches Gilgit and Ladakh. While battles raged in Jammu and the valley, Pakistan turned towards the high altitude frontiers of Ladakh and Gilgit. In November 1947, the Gilgit Scouts, under pro Pakistan mutiny, captured the Gilgit Agency, handing it over to Pakistan. This betrayal gave Pakistan control over the northern mountains and a base to attack Ladakh. The invaders, including Chitral Scouts and the Pakistani led militia, aimed to capture Skardu, Kargil, and Leh. Indian forces in Ladakh were thin, just a few state troops and local guards with almost no reinforcements or roads. The battle for Ladakh became a race against time. India needed to defend this remote region before the enemy broke through. What followed were some of the most dramatic high altitude operations in Indian military history. Colonel Thapa's heroic defense of Skardu. Colonel Sher Jung Thapa, commander of the Skardu garrison, held the fort with fewer than 600 men against thousands of attackers. Beginning in February 1948, the siege of Skardu lasted over 6 months with relentless shelling and multiple enemy assaults. Supplies ran low, food was rationed, and ammunition dwindled, but Colonel Thapa refused to surrender. His men, including local Ladakhi volunteers, fought with unmatched bravery amid snow, starvation, and isolation. Messages for help were sent, but Indian reinforcement couldn't break through the mountainous terrain. By August 1948, with no food or ammo left, Skardu finally fell, but not before making history as one of India's longest siege defenses. Colonel Thapa's defense tied down Pakistani forces for months and became a symbol of indomitable courage. Saving Leh, local militias, and air support. While Skardu fell, Indian forces made a desperate bid to save Leh, the capital of Ladakh, from a similar fate. The town had minimal troops, just a handful of state forces and local Ladakhi volunteers, many of them Buddhist monks and villagers. Community leader Kushak Bakula rallied civilians, forming a makeshift militia to man defenses and patrol mountain paths. The Indian Air Force braved extreme altitudes to fly in 2x8 Gurkha rifles, landing on Leh's crude airstrip. Lieutenant Colonel H. S. Parab and his men were ordered to hold Leh to the last man and last bullet. Supplies, weapons, and reinforcements continued to trickle by air even as enemy pressure mounted on surrounding posts. The joint effort of civilians, monks, and soldiers saved Leh and kept central Ladakh under Indian control. The Battle of Jojila, tanks at 11,000 feet. By mid 1948, the road from Srinagar to Leh was blocked. Jojila Pass had fallen to Pakistani forces. Indian troops made multiple attempts to recapture it but failed due to machine gun nests and artillery on the heights. Then came bold plan. General K. S. Thimaiya decided to use tanks at 11,000 feet, a world first in warfare. Engineers worked around the clock to create a tank-worthy trail up the treacherous slopes. On 1st November 1948, Operation Bison was launched. M5 Stuart tanks of the 7th Cavalry roared up the pass. The enemy was stunned. They never expected armor at such altitude and fled in disarray. By day's end, Jojila was recaptured, opening the gateway to Ladakh and turning the tide of high altitude war. Operation Bison and the liberation of Kargil. After the stunning success at Jojila, Indian forces pushed forward to liberate Dras and Kargil. Infantry and tanks advanced through snow-laden ridges, braving enemy fire, sub-zero temperatures, and landslides. The enemy, now on the back foot, retreated towards Gilgit-Baltistan, leaving behind weapons, munitions, and war dead. Indian troops reclaimed Dras and reached Kargil by 24th November 1948, restoring the land link to Leh. Operation Bison proved India's capability to fight and win in extreme terrains. It sealed Ladakh's fate in India's favor. These victories ensured that the entire eastern Ladakh front remained with India when the ceasefire came. The recapture of Kargil also gave India a strategic edge that would prove vital in later conflicts. National unity in arms, India's multi ethnic army. The 1947-1948 war showcased India's strength in unity through diversity, with soldiers from every region and religion fighting as one. Dogras, Gurkhas, Sikhs, Rajputs, Marathas, and Muslims from Uttar Pradesh stood side by side in defense of Kashmir. Officers like Brigadier Muhammad Usman, a Muslim, and Major Somnath Sharma, a Hindu, laid down their lives for India. The newly formed Indian Army had just emerged from partition's upheaval, but it displayed remarkable professionalism and valor. From the valley to the heights of Ladakh, battalions of every ethnic background operated in complete coordination and mutual respect. This unity under the tricolor sent a powerful message. India's identity was not based on religion but on shared values. The war cemented the secular character of India's armed forces, inspiring generations to come. Women and civilians in the defense of Kashmir. When the tribal raiders approached Srinagar, civilians, students, and women rose to defend their homeland. Members of Sheikh Abdullah's National Conference, including women's militia groups, helped build barricades and dug trenches. Armed with rifles and sticks, they patrolled streets, relayed messages, and even helped direct reinforcements during the crisis. In the countryside, villagers guided Indian troops through mountain paths and provided food, shelter, and crucial intelligence. Women like Sister Teresa Lina of Baramulla's hospital died protecting patients from the raiders' violence. The people of Kashmir, regardless of faith, rejected the invaders and embraced the Indian Army as protectors. The spontaneous civilian resistance reaffirmed Kashmir's commitment to India and made clear that freedom was worth fighting for. The role of Indian Air Force and pilots. The Indian Air Force played a decisive role in the 1947 to 48 war, often operating under extreme conditions. On 27th October 1947, the 1st Dakotas flew troops into Srinagar's barely secure airfield under threat of sniper fire. Wing Commander K. L. Bhatia and Warrant Officer A. B. Varghese were among the first to fly into combat zones. Pilots braved mountain turbulence, hostile gunfire, and crude airstrips to deliver supplies and reinforcements. In Poonch and Leh, Dakotas landed on improvised runways under shelling, bringing hope to besieged towns. Airmen evacuated thousands of refugees and brought in ammunition and food when roads were cut off. Their courage was instrumental in saving Kashmir, turning the tide of war from the sky. Five Param Veer Chakra heroes of the war. The 1947 to 48 war produced India's first Param Veer Chakra awardees, the nation's highest military honor for valor. Major Somnath Sharma of 4th Kumaon died in Budgam, fighting to the last man to save Srinagar. Naik Jadunath Singh, 1st Rajput, held off waves of attackers at Taindar, saving Naushera from collapse. Lance Naik Karam Singh, 1st Sikh, fought off repeated Pakistani assaults at Titwal despite grenade injuries. 2nd Lieutenant Rama Raghoba Rane, an engineer, cleared minefields under fire to enable tanks to reach Rajouri. Captain Piru Singh, 6th Rajputana Rifles, stormed enemy bunkers near Tithwal, dying in hand-to-hand combat after being wounded. Their gallantry stories remain legends of courage, symbolizing India's grit in its first war as a free nation. India's military gains and the UN ceasefire. By late 1948, India had turned the tide. Srinagar, Baramulla, Poonch, Leh, Kargil, Dras, and Rajouri were all secured. Pakistani led forces were on the retreat, and India had gained upper ground in both the valley and Ladakh sectors. However, in January 1948, India had referred the issue to the United Nations, hoping for a diplomatic resolution. The UN ordered a ceasefire, effective 1st January 1949, freezing the conflict with a ceasefire line later called the Line of Control. India retained about two-thirds of Jammu and Kashmir, while Pakistan held the rest, what it called Azad Kashmir. No plebiscite followed, as Pakistan refused to withdraw troops, violating UN conditions. Though India won on the battlefield, the ceasefire left an unfinished legacy and a conflict that still shapes the region today. Impact on Indian politics and military doctrine. The 1947 to 48 war was India's first military test, and it transformed defense policy and politics overnight. The Indian Army, still reorganizing after partition, had to quickly adapt to mountain warfare and joint operations. The war exposed logistical gaps, especially in border infrastructure, prompting investments in roads, airstrips, and new mountain units. Politically, it reaffirmed India's secular vision as soldiers of all religions fought together to protect Kashmir. Leaders like Nehru and Sardar Patel realized the urgency of securing border regions and integrating princely states more tightly. The experience shaped India's future defense planning and led to modernization of the armed forces. It also highlighted the strategic vulnerability of Jammu and Kashmir, making its security a long-term priority. Legacy of the war in Jammu and Kashmir. The war left Jammu and Kashmir divided, with India holding the valley, Ladakh, and Jammu, while Pakistan occupied Gilgit-Baltistan and Azad Kashmir. The line of control became a symbol of region's unfinished conflict, a ceasefire without resolution. In the valley, India's defense against invaders earned widespread respect, especially from civilians who saw Indian soldiers as protectors. Sheikh Abdullah supported accession and became the state's prime minister, aligning Kashmir with India's secular ideals. However, the trauma of war and partition lingered. Many families were spilt, and memories of massacres remained raw. Skardu, Mirpur, and Muzaffarabad were lost, but the valley and Leh were saved. The war's outcome defined Kashmir's identity within India and deepened India's emotional, military, and political ties to the region. Public sentiment and national integration. The war galvanized public opinion across India. Citizens rallied behind the army with donations, prayers, and volunteer aid. Stories of heroism like those of Somnath Sharma, Jadunath Singh were reported widely, inspiring national pride. Communities organized drives to support refugees and supply frontline troops with clothes, food, and medicines. The war fostered a sense of national unity, especially after the trauma of partition, by showing what united India could achieve. Civilians in Kashmir openly embraced India, rejecting Pakistan's raiders who had caused death and destruction. The Indian flag over Srinagar became a symbol of resilience, and Kashmir was now firmly etched in the Indian heart. The war helped forge a pan Indian identity anchored in bravery, sacrifice, and shared purpose. What could have been the unfinished victory? Many Indian leaders and soldiers believed that, had the war continued, the entire state could have been liberated. At the time of UN ceasefire in January 1949, Indian forces had the momentum and were advancing on multiple fronts. Towns like Muzaffarabad, Skardu, and parts of Gilgit-Baltistan could have been reclaimed with few more weeks of fighting. However, the Indian government opted for diplomacy, seeking peace and preventing further bloodshed. Pakistan, meanwhile, never withdrew its forces from the occupied areas, defying the UN resolution and halting the plebiscite process. The ceasefire froze a victory that was within reach and left Kashmir's fate entangled in global politics. It remains a point of strategic and emotional debate, a decision that secured peace but left an open wound. Conclusion. A war that forged a nation. The 1947 to 48 war was more than a military conflict. It was India's baptism by fire as a sovereign republic. It tested India's army, government, and people, and they rose with valor, unity, and resolve. From Srinagar to Jojila, from Poonch to Rajouri, Indian soldiers wrote chapters of sacrifice that still echo today. The war preserved the integrity of the Union, protected innocent lives, and sent a clear message: India would not be broken. It also laid the foundation for India's defense doctrine, military traditions, and Kashmir's political journey. The bravery of its heroes, the strength of its civilians, and the vision of its leaders shaped modern India. This was not just a war for territory, it was a fight for India's soul, and in that, India prevailed. And so, we conclude this story not just of war, but of how a nation was truly forged. The Indo-Pak War of 1947 to 48 gave India its first heroes, its first military doctrines, and its first true test of unity. It was a fight to defend not just land, but people, civilians who stood shoulder to shoulder with soldiers, women who resisted tyranny, and leaders who made impossible choices under fire. Kashmir remained with India not because of politics, but because of the blood spilled by its defenders and the will of its people. Yes, the victory was partial. Yes, some lands remained lost. But what India gained was something eternal, faith in itself. Let us remember the names, the battles, the moments, and above all, the sacrifice. Jai Hind.